Hi, this is Lainey Cameron. I am here with Sonali Dev, and this book, Sonali, is oh my goodness, I loved it to death. It was so fun. Bindi is just such a fun character, and I love the idea that you have like three generations of women, and they're all dealing with like how your family history and the patriarchy and all of these things that have been put in our heads affect us and our self worth and our relationships. But also, my goodness, this made me laugh so many times through this book. I was like giggling out loud. Like, congratulations. What a phenomenal book.
Thank you so much. You're one of the first people outside of my close circle and my editor, that I'm talking to about it. And so it is incredibly exciting that you laughed and that you loved it. Thank you.
And where are you joining me from today?
I am in Naperville, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. So we call it Chicagoland,
Chicagoland.
where it's
Well,
just starting to get fall. So we're having some coolish days.
well, when this airs, people will be listening, going, "It's just becoming fall. It's December," but we're recording this at the beginning of fall. So, for what folks are wondering, like, "Wow, Chicago changed its seasons." We're recording this in October, and I'm so excited because there's so many good things coming for this book. And by the time you all get to listen to this interview, it's going to have been an Amazon first reads. I think it's going to have like so many people excited about it. And let's start by introducing anyone who's not lucky enough to have heard about it yet to the book. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what The Vibrant Years is about?
So it is a story of three generations of Indian American women who are on the date, who happen to find themselves on the dating scene at the very same time. That was kind of the thing when I started writing it that I was playing with. So there is this hot grandmom, a 65-year-old grandmother who's just moved into this fancy retirement community, and she finds herself the new hottie on the block. And then there is the divorced mom, who is just 2 years out of the divorce, and the grandmother is her mother-in-law, who kind of has chosen her over her own son in the divorce. And this granddaughter who is 23, and she's a coding genius, and she has just written this app, or rather, she has just pitched this app in the wake of this other really successful app that she's done. It's a dating app, and she has never dated, and so she pulls her mother and grandmother in to research the apps. So here they are, these three single women. Who are on the dating scene, which makes for some hilarious first dates, but and by hilarious I mean terrible, terrible first dates.
Terrible.
But I think it's more about what is available to us as women today, because what is available to me as a woman today is completely different from what was available to my grandmother. So we've made this long journey, and yet we have to reconcile to it. What are we doing with it, and what does that mean in terms of living our best lives? That's really what it's about.
And without giving away no spoilers, we have a no spoiler rule on this podcast. The grandmother has a secret. And what was really interesting to me was that, like, her secret has to do with something that happened in her younger years. And it's wound up in a concept of shame, right? Of shame around sexuality, which kind of is a theme through the book, like how we struggle with being open with questions around women's sexuality. And that really spoke to me because I love books that kind of broach topics, which are hard topics, right? Like, we don't like to talk about this stuff. It makes us feel all awkward. And so I loved the fact that the grandmother's secret, not telling anyone what it is, was kind of related to her being okay with who she is, right? And so, like, was that a deliberate thought when you thought about, like, how am I going to make this thing in her past come to life?
Absolutely. I think that I have seen in my own life, I think one of the greatest things that has changed for women from my grandmother's generation to mine, which is something I have seen in real time, is what we're allowed to do sexually. What we're allowed to own, how our own relationship with our sexuality is what has changed, I think. And so I wanted to really dig into that. We don't I just turned 50 last week, and you don't suddenly stop, right? You don't stop being a whole person. And this whole stereotype of older women either being the crone or opposite vinegar or wise. You don't suddenly just turn into someone who has turned off this fullness in terms of our body and our sexuality and attraction and all of that. That doesn't go away. And so Bindu, I think, is how I see myself and my friends being at 65. I cannot imagine us suddenly becoming, you know, um, sari wearing, putting ourselves last, only being there for these punchlines. We don't disappear. And I think a lot of it was about that. And the journey really for Bindu is that she was very young someone who was comfortable with her sexuality, who was comfortable with everything she was, with her own splendor, and then it's literally beaten out of her. The world
Right.
around her is not on the same page, and it gets beaten out of her, and this is her journey of getting it back. And she does take pieces of it back. She refuses to let all of it go, and yet so much, even for someone that vibrant, someone that focused on not letting everything go, her identity go, even for someone like that, she's unable to hold on to all of it. And this is her kind of having an opportunity to get it back. And so I think it really is about our relationship with, because our relationship with owning our own bodies is really parallel to us owning our space in the world, us being able to take all the opportunities, right? Because we supposedly, we're told over and over again, a woman can do everything a man can. And yet the fact that it needs to be said,
Right.
harkens to the things that are standing in our way. And really what's standing in our way is our own social conditioning. We've internalized so much that just even taking what's available isn't as uncomplicated as it should be.
Right. And your book here, it also deals with some issues with Ali. Am I saying Ali's name right? Ali?
Ali,
The
Alicia,
Ali.
Ali.
Yep. Alicia. So Ali has got some issues where she got the job she wanted. She really wanted to be a presenter on the local TV station on the news, but she was kind of like the diversity token hire. And so it's like, we're gonna give you the job, but we're not really gonna give you the job, and we're gonna like put you there, but then you're not really gonna get all the opportunities, and we're gonna keep telling you one day you'll get it. And I thought that was very well portrayed as well. This is the Bindi is her mother-in-law, but like I thought that relationship and how Bindi sees Ali and Ali sees Bindi, you did a really great job in portraying this really complex mother-daughter-in-law relationship.
Yeah, because I mean, I think one of my main focuses when I'm writing is to think about the lies we've been told, and how, how we've internalized the lies we've been told. And I think that one of the lies is that women pull other women down, that, that it is in our nature, because we're told this all the time. Especially, I think a lot of guys think it's funny to talk about how we like to pull each other down, how, the whole cat fight culture, all of that, I think, is a really great way to put the focus on the wrong things when it comes to what we, as what the world should be focusing on when they're talking about females and female relationships. Because, and I mean, non-male, let's say, in terms of gender. But I, in my own life, and everything I have seen in my life, is I would not be who I am without all the women in my life who hold me up, who don't let me fall, who literally prop me up, right? In every, and I'm sure you have the same experience. And any woman you talk to, there's very few women who don't, and that there's a complicated history if you are a woman who feels that they have not had that. There is, not to speak for all women, but you could probably dig in to find something, where there's a very peculiar thing that's happening. But across the board, everyone I know, and certainly in my own life, women, who are my friends, who are my family, who my grandmothers, my grandmother's sisters, my mother-in-law, who had none of the advantages, none of the opportunities that I have, and has been nothing but supportive. So here is a woman who has had, um, none of the things that allowed me to become who I am, and yet every time I took an opportunity, for her it was you're taking this opportunity, and it was a thing of joy, right? And if I had chosen not to take it, she would say, you can now take it, so take it. So all the women in my life who did not have the opportunities I have never, they've felt sadness that they didn't get that, and they've been able to share the heartbreak of that, but none of them have begrudged me and my sisters-in-law getting that. And I think that that's the essence that I find in female relationships. And I was trying to kind of get into Bindu and Ali's relationship from that perspective, right? What
Well, no,
happens if women recognize that even the old, even in the old way, right, where mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law were pitted against each other. The history of it is that we were literally given so few places to prove ourselves and to earn our self-worth, right? You were given the kitchen and you were given the home, and then you were pitted against each other, so you were stuck in these fights where you should never have been, right? If you gave us a
right.
platform that is completely, open, and it's a platform that is, where we actually have real opportunities, then we're not fighting each other, right? We're only fighting each other when you make us fight each other, like those dog fights. You're literally trapping us
Well,
in these situations and then saying, oh, but that's
it's
who you are. No, that's not who we are. That's the world you've created for us. And I think watching women, and all of my books have this, women who recognize that, women who see how wrong it is and then act in ways that are natural, that are completely true to themselves, but that are not trapped by these things.
Well, it's funny you're talking to my heart here because my own first novel was actually inspired by the whole catfight thing and how crazy it drives me that that is portrayed that way in the media, in TV, in movies, in books. And I actually set out to write the opposite book because that was exactly what drove me nuts. Is I had your experience, I have your experience, even in the writing community, right? The way writers celebrate and lift each other up, especially women writers, as opposed to seeing it as a competition or tearing each other down. It's for me part of what makes being in this writing community worth it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And which is not to say we don't feel bad when we see failure, that we don't feel a little bite of envy when someone gets what we want. But we all have the maturity to say, I feel this bite, but I'm really also happy for you. And that is not mutually exclusive. We have the
Right.
emotional bandwidth. So please don't tell us we don't. So it does completely annoy me when people say, "Oh, women pull each other down." No, we don't,
So
any more than you do.
So I have a kind of related question here for you. So you've been writing for a while and you have these phenomenal books and all these readers who love you. And this is your first book that I would say is being categorized as pure women's fiction as opposed to romance. But I'm really interested in how you see it because I suspect you may not see it that simply coming from that background of having been put in the box that is romance and now you're in this box called women's fiction. Like, how do you see it as you think about the evolution of your books?
So it is a little complicated. I do really, at the heart of it, I want to write about relationships, right? I want to explore human relationships, and love is a large part of that. And even my books that have been focused on romantic relationships have really focused on protagonist relationships with themselves and the world within which they operate, right? And so, in fact, when I wrote my first book, I remember going to a writers group meeting, and they asked me what genre it is, and I had no idea what that meant. I had grown up watching a lot of Bollywood films, reading, a lot of British classics. That's what was available to us, and a lot of the American pot boilers of the 80s and 90s. So so a lot of Sidney Sheldon and Jeffrey Archer, who is of course not American, but a lot of the Eric Segels and like all of that, which are which are just full stories, right, that have pieces of things in it. They're storytellers stories that are a mix of, there's a little bit of mystery, there's romance in it, there's all of that. So I always thought of a story as that, right? A person who is missing something in their life, making their way to be okay with it, right? It's essentially that. And then within their world, navigating all the things that get in their way. And so when I wrote my book, I wrote it that way. But there is a structure to romance, which kind of is also freeing and is also directional when you're writing. And so, of course, that is in these books, but often. So also when my book, my first books came out, um, Bollywood Affair and Bollywood Bride, there were really no other um, books, or there were really few that were actually contemporary romance on the shelves. There were people writing where they were being given opportunities in ebooks and things, but there weren't that many on shelves that were straight out romance, and automatically publishers tended to kind of not let you be in contemporary romance, and almost forcefully slapped the label of women's fiction on there, because as soon as you brought culture into a story, it wasn't allowed to be just about two people falling in love. And so it was this very complicated, kind of twisted thing that was going on. And I mean, I just wrote the books I wanted to write, and it was, I had to navigate that too. I had to, when people said that this is women's fiction, I had to say no, it is romance, because it was. And when people said that that this is not women's fiction, I had to say it is, because my first book, the protagonist was a child bride. So there was this whole piece of of culture and of world building that was also happening, and women's journey is always a part of my. So really, women's fiction, if you define it, I mean, I don't think these days they even, like, there is one definition of it, which is like the human journey, which is literally every book. And then if you say it's the woman's journey, then a traditional romance novel cannot not be women's fiction, because every romance novel is a woman's journey, from going from a place of where she feels unable to let love into her life, to getting to a place where she can, like, that is the intrinsic women's journey. So I mean, I don't think that they're as far apart. Now, if you think of the distinction, so then people will say, well, a women's fiction novel will stand even if you pull the romance out of it, the romantic arc out of it. So if you're defining it that way, then the Vibrant Years, it you could maybe, because it is the
Yeah.
relationship between these three women. Now, the love plays a large part, romantic love also plays a large part in their personal stories. But if you really wanted to make force that definition,
Right.
and sure, could you really pull the romantic angle, romance arcs out of it, and it'll still stand? Yes. So, and
It
it'll
makes
still
sense. No,
stand.
it makes sense how you're saying it. Yeah. And you can also have a women's fiction novel that is about that emotional arc of the woman that doesn't have any romance in it at all, right? Like there could be zero romance. Mine didn't really have any romance in it, but it was the nature of what the story was. I'm intrigued as to how your editing process has changed at all, if it has. Like you've had so many successful books now. Has it changed, and was it any different for this book than the others?
So I it's always hard to define a process, right? I mean, if we could define our process in any neat and tidy terms, I don't know, we would be magical creatures, not suffering authors. But there is, like, if I had to bring filter down um my process into something coherent, it would be that I have to really understand what I'm talking about in terms of character before I go in. So I have to understand what is wrong, so I have to understand conflict, and I have to understand character. And then so I kind of throw that on. It's never an outline, but I kind of throw that in these little bubbles on a page where I kind of know what's happening. And then I have to vomit out a first draft, which is literally like a glorified outline. And it's really ugly, but it has to come out really fast. And so I literally just puke it all out. And then I 90% of my work happens in revisions. I'm all my, everything is revisions, which gives me a lot of freedom in my first draft and in, the early drafts, to really play, right? To really try things out, and to not be afraid. I think the, the only way I can deal with the natural fear that comes with, storytelling in a public space is, is to know I can fix it. And I have found that's the way I trick myself, is that I write it all out, I put it out there, and I know I can fix it, and I don't let anything, and then that can go on for, as much time as that takes. And but before it goes out for the last time, every single one of my books, and I know that this is a huge gift, I don't take this lightly, but before my book goes out, it is exactly where I want it to be. And if it isn't, I hope I never in my life have to send it out, without being able to make it what it needs to be. So the vision in my head and the vision on paper takes a lot of drafts, but by tricking myself into believing that I will have another chance to fix it, I'm able to really do what I want.
That's great. And it talks directly to something that I know other writers are always interested in, which is what advice might you have for writers who are earlier in their career than where you are? Maybe who look at you as a great model of success and say, wow, how would I do that one day? Like, what do you advise folks?
Oh my gosh, that's always, a tough one. But I think, it's the thing that there are people who will tell you that, I don't understand markets. I mean, I scratch that. It's not like I don't understand markets, but I write what really excites me and what speaks to my heart. And I think that authenticity. So running running after the wind, or kind of trying to chase trends, if that works for you, that is great. But I think the true joy of doing this thing, if you want to do this in a joyous way, you have to stick to what speaks to you, what kind of, what is important to you to say. And so that, for sure. And there will be people, who will tell you that will never sell, and that won't, and you have to take that into consideration. But there are ways to maintain your authenticity. And so you listen, but you never, but if it feels like a compromise, don't do it. If you
I love that.
listen, and so anything that feels like a compromise, I try to avoid. And of course, I mean, perseverance and tenacity. This is not,
Right.
this is a long, long game. And if there are a few people who come out the gate, running, but it is one in a million that happens to. Everyone else who succeeds because they refuse to leave, and they refuse to give up, and that is the only way, is to refuse to give up. So just hang in there, and keep doing what you love doing. Then it's not wasted years. If I have spent 5 years doing something I really love to do, then even if it takes 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, you've enjoyed those. And so then,
Right. And how do you keep finding inspiration? Because you've had so many fascinating books and they're all so different. Like, what do you do? Like, I talked to Barbara O'Neill and she keeps like newspaper filings, right? Whenever she sees something really interesting and her husband's really good at spotting them for her as well. And she sticks them in a folder for later. But like, what's your process of how do you continue to be open to inspiration?
I think for me, it's, it's the same thing, but a little more organic, because I don't, it's I stick with things that matter to me. So, as this idea of aging and your relationship with your sexuality is a very important thing to me. And and so it sits in my head until I figure out how to give it story form, right? Or something has happened, like the next book I'm writing is about a friendship that's torn apart by a surrogacy arrangement. Now, I have had single friends that we have had conversations where I've had friends with fertility issues, and we've had conversations when we were younger about, whom would I do that for, and whom I would, like, are there people in the world I would carry a child for. And so these are conversations that have happened in my life, and that is a level of love that, that makes for very strong feelings and exploration. And so that kind of is where that would come from. And I think at the heart of it, the whole Rajay series had to do with making a place your home, right? As an immigrant, this journey of owning your home, of moving somewhere and then making that journey of actually becoming of that place. And to me, that journey is me. It's been my life for 26 years. And a large part of that journey, I think, from a larger picture, is political power, right? um, a home really becomes your home when you say, I now want to be part of making decisions. That's when I think, that's kind of, if you think of immigrant transformation, that's pretty high up on the ladder, as a ladder. If you think of it as a ladder, then, and so this family who is now wanting political power, is this journey of making your home home. And so the heart of that whole 4 book series was that, was this family that dreams of political power, and has, their whole journey has been of making this place home. And then all the other stuff comes into it. And often just, women, any kind of, every one of my stories is women doing the tightrope walk between personal freedom and and societal expectations. And there is so much to be said there, right? There is so much.
Right.
So this, it's always experience. It's always based in experience for me. It has to speak to something that's important to me. And along the way, of course, I love the absurd. Like, I love ridiculous is the word I have to search for in my, the word. We all have one word that we have to search for and replace and find synonyms for. I think I'm fascinated by the absurd, and that's what makes me laugh. And and so then, even if it is a very serious issue that's close to my heart, I want to find, like, this whole sexuality dating thing, the absurdity of the reality of dates today
Right.
is just such great fodder for humor. And so,
Oh,
I
yes.
think mixing that up, anything that I'm doing, I also want the really ridiculous and absurd side of it to be part of it. So that's how my stories come together, I think.
Oh, there is one scene where there's a date that has a restaurant that I had never heard of the concept of this restaurant that's in this date, but how would you describe it? All things from the earth, like worms, and like it had me giggling. That was one of the moments in the book that just had me so giggling.
Yeah,
So
I still laugh out loud at all 3 of those. And yes, I understand that, we're going to have to find sustainable ways of feeding ourselves, but I'm not ready to eat earthworms just yet.
me neither.
It's, yeah, it's hilarious, how often, again, these things, which, yes, are seriously important, but the smug that goes with it, and, people who are actually seeing what's terrifying
Abs-
in terms of the environment.
Absolutely.
It's important, but it's also really funny.
Right. Well, I have one last question for you because we're at the end of our time here. Can you recommend anything good that you've enjoyed reading?
So I was really fortunate. So the Vibrant Years comes out with Mindy's book studio, and it's the first book that comes out through Mindy Kaling's imprint. And the second book is called I'll Stop the World. It's by Lauren Thurman. I hope I'm saying that right. And I was lucky enough to read it, read an early copy of it. And that was the last one I read. And it is absolutely brilliant. It's time travel, which is really hard to pull off. And it's young adult. And she has, I mean, it's brilliant. The way that she has woven all of this together. It's a page turner, and it says really important things about our world and how we do relationships and what's important and what's not. um, and just, it's kind of between 1985 or 84 and the present day. And it's pretty intense how the world has changed and what has happened. It's such a page turner, and I loved it. Also read, but we were talking about Barbara, and Barbara O'Neill's This Place of Wonder. which was, and Barbara is a dear friend, and we often talk about triggers, things in books that make me put the book down. And this place of wonder has some of those things in it, and yet, I mean, the equanimity and kind of the depth and sensitivity with which she goes into it, and the way she sees her characters as these complete beings, um, it's really hard to not understand. And so she made me, root for, maybe not root for, but completely understand these flawed characters and the choices they make. And it's, again, absolutely brilliant and masterful. In fact, how she's masterful in her writing. Like when I'm
Great.
stuck, I often, break down how she does beginnings, how she does transitions, how she does difficult characters. It's masterful. So that was another
Yeah, I
one that I
agree.
absolutely loved.
I totally agree. It really is. She's masterful. And I loved what she had to say about voice when she did an interview on this podcast and finding your own voice. I'll put the link in the show notes if folks want to go back and listen to that one. And I'll put the link to both of your to your book recommendations here. Yeah, I'm excited. Mindy Kaling's book studio, like brand new thing. And you're the first book, which is pretty damn cool.
Oh,
Last question for you. Where do you hang out online? If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to see what you're up to follow you?
I everything is on sonalidev.com. So all my social media handles and email, all of that is on sonalidev.com. If you're going to pick one thing to follow, one social media platform to follow me on, I would recommend Instagram. I am very much alive there. I'm very much myself there. So it's not all books and books. It's a lot of what my life is. So it is. Um, Instagram would be it. I also have a newsletter which goes out about once a month, and I call it my 3 R's. So it's a recipe, a recommendation, and a really bad joke, which comes from my family's group chat. This god awful jokes, and I thought I should share. And so there's it's a light it's not spammy. And if you enjoy hearing from authors, it might be something you enjoy, and of course, it keeps you up to date on what's coming. My crazy 50th birthday celebration in El Salvador, things like that.
Awesome. Awesome. I know I follow you on Instagram and I love seeing your travel and what you're up to, as well as your writing progress, like your new books. So I will put all the links to all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me today. And I'd encourage folks, go read The Vibrant Years. I loved it. Absolutely adored it. I need to go write my own review.
Thank you so much, Lainey. I am really excited about this book. I feel like this was the book I was born to write. So I really hope it gets in the hands of people. And thank you for helping me do that.